I never imagined that something as simple as protecting my pool could turn into a full-blown 911 call. The sun was barely setting, the air warm with that sticky summer heaviness, and I had just finished tightening the final screw on the new smart lock I installed on my pool fence. To me, it was nothing more than common sense, safety first. I didn't want neighborhood kids sneaking in, getting hurt, or worse. But to Karen's teenage son, a boy who thought the law existed to serve his every whim, it was apparently an act of war. What happened next would drag me into a storm of accusations, trespassing, police sirens, and a fight for my own right to feel safe in my home. The first sign of trouble came with the sound of feet stomping against concrete. I looked up from the pool gate and there he was, Karen's son, Dylan. 17 years old, tall for his age, but with the demeanor of a spoiled child who had never been told, no. His phone was already out, the screen glowing as though it were a badge of honor. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, voice cracking with a mix of teenage bravado and fear. I explained calmly, "I'm installing a smart lock. It's for safety. The pool's off limits unless I'm here." Dylan's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing in the kind of glare you'd expect from someone much older. "You can't do that. My friends and I use this pool. It's community property." I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to laugh. "No, Dylan. This is my property. This is my pool. And you've been trespassing without my permission." That one word, trespassing, must have struck a nerve. His face turned red, his hands shaking as he raised the phone higher. "I'm calling 911. He shouted. At first, I thought it was just teenage dramatics. But then I heard him speaking to a dispatcher, his voice trembling yet confident as he spun a story. "Yeah, I'm at my neighborhood pool, and this guy is locking me out. He's threatening me. He's got some kind of device on the gate." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just childish entitlement. This was a direct attack on me, and it was about to get real. By the time the flashing red and blue lights painted the cul-de-sac, I had already rehearsed my explanation a dozen times in my head. The officers stepped out, hands resting near their belts, eyes scanning the scene. Karen came running down her driveway, her voice slicing through the night air like broken glass. "Officer, this man is harassing my son. He's locking up community property and endangering children." I wanted to scream, to shake her and ask how she could twist the truth so easily, but instead I stood my ground. One officer approached me and asked calmly, "Sir, can you explain what's going on?" I pointed to the pool, the fence, the lock. "This is my property. I installed a smart lock for safety. Dylan has been trespassing, and when I told him he couldn't use the pool without permission, he called you." The officer nodded, jotting something down. Karen, of course, wasn't having it. She pulled out a thick folder of HOA papers, waving them like a sword. "The bylaws say this is shared space. He has no right to restrict access." But the officer's eyes narrowed as he read the sign clearly posted on the gate: "Private property, no trespassing, pool access by owner permission only." Suddenly, her argument didn't hold much water. Still, the tension didn't ease. Dylan stood off to the side, tears of frustration pooling in his eyes. He muttered under his breath about rights and fairness, but what struck me most was the fear. For all his arrogance, he looked like a kid who realized he might actually face consequences. The officer turned back to him and said, "Son, you can't call 911 for something like this. False reports tie up emergency resources. You could be charged." That's when Karen snapped. She shouted, "Don't you dare threaten my child. He's just a boy." But even her theatrics couldn't hide the truth. Her son had crossed a line, and everyone could see it. The police left with a warning, and for a moment, I thought the ordeal was over. But the real battle came later, at the HOA meeting. Karen had rallied her allies, painting me as the villain who wanted to hoard amenities. The room buzzed with whispers as neighbors debated my right to control my own pool. My hands shook as I stood before them, but I knew I couldn't stay silent. I told them about the trespassing, about the risks, about the night I watched Dylan climb the fence with his friends after midnight, laughing as they splashed into the water without a care for their own safety. What if one of them drowned? I asked, my voice breaking. Who would be responsible? Not Dylan, not Karen, me. And I won't let my property, or my conscience, carry that weight. Silence fell across the room. For the first time, I saw something shift. People weren't just seeing a feud anymore, they were seeing a father, a neighbor, a man trying to do the right thing. One older neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, stood up and said firmly, "He's right. We've all seen those kids sneaking in. It's dangerous. He has every right to protect his pool." One by one, others began to agree. Even some of Karen's usual supporters looked away from her glare. By the end of the night, the board voted unanimously, the smart lock stayed. My property. My rules. My responsibility. Karen stormed out of the meeting, dragging Dylan by the arm, her voice echoing down the hall about corruption and favoritism. But I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt relieved. Not because I had won, but because I had finally drawn a line. No one would misuse my kindness or endanger lives on my watch again. Dylan never apologized, but I noticed something change in him too. He stopped trespassing. He stopped glaring at me every time he walked by. Maybe, just maybe, the lesson had sunk in. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me more than I expected. It showed me that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. It reminded me that speaking the truth, even when your voice shakes, can turn the tide. And most of all, it proved that doing the right thing doesn't always make you popular, but it makes you strong. So when people ask me why I went through all that trouble for a simple smart lock, I smile and tell them this, because sometimes protecting what's yours means protecting everyone. And no amount of WA drama, entitled kids, or false 911 calls will ever change that.